Speaking of dishonesty in service of the Democrat narrative around COVID and the fight against coronavirus, China virus, all that stuff, we have been living through one of the most epic gaslighting situations I've ever seen in my entire life. Actually, a couple of them. The two great gaslightings of the COVID pandemic have been, one, public health experts who were willing to bow down in subservience to the Black Lives Matter movement at the risk and cost of infections and lives by their own logic, by their own expert advice, to bow down before that movement and justify, not even apologize for it, just straight up justify the mass protests across the country during lockdowns when people still could not bury loved ones, could not go to funerals, could not have weddings. But you could get together with 2,000 of your buddies, walk down the street screaming, breaking stuff, yelling and spitting at cops. And people with MD next to their name on Twitter, at least, or on MSNBC and CNN would say, well, this is good for public health, actually, because, you know, this is about saving black lives. No, it's not. It's actually not what the movement's about. I'm not going to allow the continued lies about this and everything. They're seizing a moral high ground that they do not occupy, okay? They are not coming at this from the moral high ground. It's just not true. They pretend. So that's one great gaslighting. And perhaps I should write a piece, The Great Gaslighting of 2020. But the other one, the other gaslighting is that the red states have done poorly against this, and the blue states, the major blue states, right, the ones where all the worst politicians come from, all the, you know, the power of the Democrat Party is situated, that they did a great job, that they were excellent in their handling of this. And that's not true. I do this show every day and have for every day of the pandemic from the center of New York City, right in the middle of Manhattan, in the middle of New York. And this place, and I will never forget, we had, as I've told you, field hospitals set up in our parks, floating hospitals, Navy hospital ships going past my window. The biggest convention center in New York set up as a massive excess capacity hospital, right? We were in a state as a city of total panic. And while it never got as bad in the numbers as they projected, which was going to be a total overflow, and it was really bad, 25 to, let's call it 25,000 dead in New York from COVID. That's without getting into dying from COVID versus dying with COVID, and the incentive that does exist for hospitals to code things as a COVID death because they get more of a reimbursement from it. And I'm sure there are people that do that are coding it a little bit more liberally to include more deaths as under the COVID umbrella. And they feel like they're also doing a service because, well, at least now they're raising more awareness about COVID-19, right? So I know that's been happening. But Governor Cuomo has become more of a household name than ever before. He had his little two-man variety show on TV at night with his brother. Why haven't you called Mom? Well, I'm going to call Mom first. What do you mean? You're the smart one, I'm the dumb one. What are you talking about? You're not Fredo, I'm Fredo, right? All this stuff that they were doing while the pandemic was raging in the city. And Cuomo, without missing a beat, doesn't say a word about the protesters other than it's lawful protest, First Amendment rights, important movement. You know, the usual bend the knee, lib pandering to BLM. A lot of that from him. But the moment that you want to open up a bar or even just serve people out on the street in open air from your bar, not enough social distancing. We're going to pull your liquor license. We're going to pull it from you. Why will you not listen to me? I am the tyrant dictator of New York. Well, he has no problem issuing fines and shutting down businesses. And they've played, this is like Lucy with the football and Charlie Brown. They tell us, oh, no, this time we promise the metrics say we can reopen. And then, nope, they pull the football away. We don't get to reopen. Haven't reopened for interior dining. Haven't reopened gyms. Haven't reopened public gatherings. None of it. Why? Well, we had 2 or 3 COVID deaths a day on average for the last couple of weeks. And these are senior citizens who are dying of COVID, right? Senior citizens who may also have been are at high risk of dying from flu and dying from other things as well. People die from things every day. 2 or 3 people dying from a disease you would think would not be enough to shut down a state of 20 million people, but here we are. Here we are. And then that brings me to, in some ways, the darkest chapter of the whole COVID response, and that is the order given. It was an order given by Governor Cuomo because he was so swept up in this belief that we were going to have overflowing hospitals. We weren't going to have capacity. People were going to be showing up to the hospital and told, oh, you don't have not only do we not have a ventilator for you, we have no ability to care for you. Now we also know ventilators are an absolute last resort for this virus. They want to do everything you can before putting on a ventilator. Ventilator is, and we should have known this early on, your chance of coming off a ventilator in the early stages of this pandemic, if you went on it, were less than 50%. That's a terrible treatment modality. I mean, that's not something to be that's not successful at all. Oh, you go on a ventilator, you got a 50-50 chance of living. Make sure we have enough ventilators for everybody. No, there were a lot of things they needed to figure out before then, other steps, pre-ventilator steps that might have been helpful. And I know some of you are yelling, how about preventative hydroxychloroquine? But there are massive incentives in the media and the Democrat Party to suppress the truth about hydroxychloroquine. We know this. I'm not saying that it works, and I'm not saying that they're even wrong in thinking it doesn't work. I am pointing out that there are enormous incentives for drug companies and enormous incentives for the Democrat Party and the media to at least delay a real reckoning over hydroxychloroquine, not as a last-ditch effort to save people in the hospital, but as an early-stage intervention, which is exactly what we already have for flu with Tamiflu. If you don't take it within the first 3 days, doesn't have any effect. Go ask your doctor. Doesn't have any effect. If you take Tamiflu when you're already having your lungs fill up with fluid because your body's unable to fight off the influenza infection, Tamiflu is not really going to do very much for you. But we're told, oh no, we've only tried hydroxychloroquine in these trials where it's given to people who are already hospitalized, already having severe symptoms, so it doesn't work. Shut up, peasant. It doesn't work. That's what they say. But let me get back. And we understand why a lot of people they've also lied. They lied to you. The media lied to you about how it was so dangerous. It's not a dangerous drug. That's a lie. Oh, it does bad things to your heart. Yeah, Tylenol will put a hole in your stomach if you take it. You know what? That's true. It can. It doesn't always, but it can create stomach bleeding, which is basically because it erodes, it creates ulceration in the lining of your stomach if you take it enough, and so on and so forth. But does that mean you're never going to take a Tylenol again, or take an acetaminophen or an ibuprofen? Or no, of course not. They put a warning label on it. Everything comes with a possible risk. So they lied to you about that, but they've lied to you about something else, and we're just beginning to see this here because I don't think they're going to be able to hide it much longer. That often happens. The press, the media will suppress a story, and then for political reasons, and then when it's no longer possible, then they run out and say, oh, we have this story to break for you, because they want to just beat their competitors because they know that people are finding out and that someone's going to break the story. So then they'll come out but they will have already sat on it for a long time because they don't want to hurt the narrative. They don't want to hurt the Democrat narrative. This is from the Associated Press. New York's true nursing home death toll cloaked in secrecy. Riverdale Nursing Home in the Bronx appears on paper to have escaped the worst of the coronavirus pandemic, with an official state count of just 4 deaths in its 146-bed facility. This is from the Associated Press piece. The truth, according to the home, is far worse. 21 dead, most transported to hospitals before they succumbed. It was a cascading effect, Administrator Emil Fuziov recalled, one after the other. New York's coronavirus death toll in nursing homes, already among the highest in the nation, could actually be a significant undercount. Unlike every other state with major outbreaks, New York only counts residents who died on nursing home property and not those who were transported to hospitals and died there. End quote. My friends, this is a big deal because we know that there were about 5,000 people who died in nursing homes from COVID-19 during the pandemic surge here in New York. But what we're now finding out is that the number could be a lot higher. Here we go. The statistic could add thousands to the state's official care home death toll of it's over 6,600. That's the official number. But so far, the administration of Democratic Governor Andrew Cuomo has refused to divulge the number, leading to speculation the state is manipulating the figures to make it appear it is doing better than other states and to make a tragic situation less dire. That's a problem, bro, says State Senator Gustavo Rivera, a Democrat. He told New York Health Commissioner Howard Zucker during a legislative hearing on nursing homes earlier this month. It seems, sir, that in this case you are choosing to define it differently so that you could look better. Oh, you mean they're cooking the books, folks? Cuomo already has the worst response of any governor in the country, in the Democrat super stronghold of New York. Worst response on a global scale, perhaps the worst major city to deal with this. And it may be even worse than that. Here's the Associated Press piece. How big a difference could it make? Since May, federal regulators have required nursing homes to submit data on coronavirus deaths each week, whether or not residents died in the facility or at a hospital. Because the requirement came after the height of New York's outbreak, the available data is relatively small. According to the federal data, roughly a fifth of the state's homes reported resident deaths from early June to mid-July, a tally of 323 dead, 65% higher than the state's count of 195 during that time period. Even if half that undercount is held true from the start of the pandemic, that would translate into thousands more nursing home resident deaths than the state has acknowledged. State Health Department surveys show 21,000 nursing home beds are lying empty this year, which is 13,000 more than expected, an increase of almost double the official state nursing home death tally. I mean, this is an absolute scandal, an absolute scandal. And this wasn't just a thing that happened. Cuomo made the decision. He decided he was in a position, he's taken all this authority. He has the authority to shut down your business on a whim as long as he wants. He also had the authority to do this, and he did. He said you must take back COVID-positive seniors into the nursing home as soon as the hospital is ready to release them. So if you're a COVID-positive senior and you don't have to be on a ventilator and they're saying that they want to, send you home, there's no quarantining really in a nursing home, right? You're sending somebody into a facility where they're going to be around other immunocompromised people because of their age and often because of comorbid health conditions. This was, if you were trying to seed the pandemic in a way that there was a maximum fatality level, this was a good policy. If you were trying to make this as fatal a disease as possible for your state as a governor, Cuomo came up with an ingenious plan. How could anybody have, it's because he was so convinced the hospitals were going to be overrun. He was wrong, and so he made a really bad decision. Now, I don't think that Cuomo wanted this to happen. I'm not saying he's a mass murderer. I'm not saying that they'll say that about Trump, of course, but I'm not saying, no, but he's an incompetent. He's a moron. When the chips were all down, when all of a sudden it was really important who the governor of New York was, this guy failed miserably and was way too busy worrying about the optics and doing the press conference, and people were talking about how he could run for president as a Democrat. Remember that? There were people calling themselves Cuomo-sexuals because he was so appealing in his press conferences. He was going on CNN with his joke brother at night. People were dying. And now they have the gall to lecture others, to lecture other people, other states, other governors. Cuomo acts like, it's just a big mask-wearing campaign would have saved us all. You know, it would have saved a few thousand, maybe thousands and thousands more than that, senior citizen lives in New York. Not having Andrew Cuomo as the governor of New York. That would have saved thousands and thousands of lives. Instead of panicking about the lack of ventilators that we didn't need, instead of panicking all the people of New York, we could have had somebody like, Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, who looked at the data and looked at what was happening and made sound decisions, not based upon control, fear, and the politics of the left. An unnerving moment yesterday. I was watching it in real time as it happened. President Trump was giving a press conference, and there was a moment where a Secret Service agent came out during the press conference in the West Wing, and he says, Mr. President, I need you to come with me. And there were early reports of gunfire outside of the White House, and there was a moment where people were understandably very concerned. And then President Trump came back, finished out the press conference, but I thought this was one of his truly Trumpian moments where he was asked if, I'll let you hear the exchange. Play clip 1.
Are you rattled by this at all, Mr. President?
I don't know. Do I seem rattled? It's unfortunate that this is a world, but the world's always been a dangerous place. It's not something that's unique. The world has been, you look back over the centuries, the world has been a dangerous place, very dangerous place, and it will continue, I guess, for a period of time.
Does this make you think differently about your personal safety inside the White House?
No, I feel very safe with the Secret Service. They're fantastic people. They're the best of the best, and they're highly trained. I don't know if anybody got to walk outside, but there were a lot of terrific-looking people ready to go if something was necessary.
Does this make you scared, sir? Can you just say for the record that you're really scared and that you're a wimp? Because that'll be a great soundbite for us. Can you just tell us that? And Trump's like, come on. Do I seem rattled? Come on. Oh, that's one of those. That's one of those moments, though, where you are just, American politics has gotten so heated right now that I hope we get through this whole election cycle without a politically motivated tragedy on all sides against any side. I really do. Last time I told you that I had a bad feeling about something, it was in roughly November, that something bad was going to, you remember this, I played it for you on the show, right? Before we went into the pandemic, I'm like, guys, it's been great. Something bad's going to happen. I don't think it's going to involve President Trump, and God bless him and keep him safe. But I worry that there's going to be some act of political violence before this election that's going to really combust everything. I can't believe we're losing our home that we didn't even sell. That's what Deborah said when she found out that she was the victim of home title theft, which is a crime that can actually cost you your home. Here's how it works. The bad guys find your information online. Then they forge your signature stating you sold your home to them. You often won't even find out about this until the eviction notice arrives. Look, the FBI is warning more and more Americans about this because it's a crime that's on the rise. But the usual identity theft services don't protect you. You have to take action now with Home Title Lock. Home Title Lock creates a virtual barrier around your home's title. This is exactly what you need to protect yourself from a situation Deborah found herself in. Go to HomeTitleLock.com and use promo code BUCK for 30 free days of protection. Again, that's HomeTitleLock.com, promo code BUCK. You can also check to see if you're already a victim of this crime and don't even know it. Make sure you use promo code BUCK at HomeTitleLock.com. Election meddling. We're going to be talking a lot about this. You know what the real the real definition of election meddling is for Democrats? We lost. If they lose, there's meddling. If they win, what meddling? Come on, what meddling? I like that Trump goes on offense on this point. Doesn't play the usual Republican game of no, please, I'm a good person. I'm acting in good faith. Don't think that I'm one of the bad guys. I prefer the Trump approach, which is to say, come on, well, what is this? You know who's really meddling? You're meddling. Play clip 2.
Well, I'm just saying the way the politicians look. The other day, they said the 3 countries, they said China and Russia and Iran, and some reporter got up and said, Russia is meddling. I said, well, didn't it mention China and Iran? Why didn't you mention them too? So I don't know. You know what I'm telling you? I'll tell you who's meddling in our elections. The Democrats are meddling by wanting and insisting on sending mail-in ballots where there's corruption all over the place. If you check what happened in New York, a small, relatively small race with Carolyn Maloney, and they called her the winner the other day because I was mentioning it at conferences and getting a lot of action on that statement. So they called her, they declared her the winner, and they have no idea who won. And the person, her opponent, is very angry. But they had mail-in voting, and they had hundreds and I think even thousands of ballots that are missing, that were fraudulent. Take a look at the Carolyn Maloney race. Take a look at Paterson, New Jersey. Take a look now at this one in Virginia, where they mailed out 500,000 applications, and they're going to people that aren't supposed to be getting an application.
Democrats are the ones that want to play games with the election. You know, they just had a CDC study that came out. Remember, the CDC is supposed to listen to the CDC all the time. Got to listen to the CDC. Not allowed to ask any questions. If you listen to Democrats, not allowed to ask any questions about the CDC. Just had a study come out. No increase in cases resulting from the from the voting in Wisconsin. So people were able to vote. They didn't get all. You know why that happened? Because they were outside. They kept a little bit of a distance from each other. They probably were wearing masks too, for whatever that's worth. And it was fine. It was fine. We've seen the data is very clear. Long, close, indoors exposure is the primary way this gets transmitted. Long, close, indoor exposure. So all you have to do with voting is have people stagger in line, stagger going in. No problem. No problem. Well, what are Democrats even talking about? Oh, we can't. No, they just want to find a way to change the rules to suit their needs and to set up a narrative in advance of the actual casting of votes so that anybody who wants to, if the Democrats lose afterwards, will be in a position to say, you know what? Yeah, the Republicans cheated because we lost, because we didn't have enough, or we had too much mail-in voting, which it doesn't matter. Whichever way they need to go, they'll go. But election meddling has become a talking point you'll hear from Democrats. This is hedging. It's hedging. It also goes to this anxiety that the libs still have because they believe that Russia gave Trump the last election. They still cling to that fiction. That fantasy is something that they have not yet given up on. They still believe that. And so they're very on edge about the possibility, about the prospect of that happening again. Very on edge, right? They're like, oh my gosh, there's going to be election interference. Election interference. Well, okay. What about election interference from China, from Iran, and what constitutes enough election interference that the election should be considered or called into doubt in some way? What's the rule on that? How much interference is enough that we have to be? Because in the last election, it was Russians spending $100,000 on Facebook ads, which is a drop in the bucket of Facebook ad spending. Is that what we're supposed to believe was enough to do? Well, there are libs who still believe. Remember when CNN would go and harass private citizens because they were a part of a Facebook group that was, they say, organized by Russian trolls or something? They'd show up to people, oh, do you realize that the Russians were convincing you of who to vote for? The whole fake news phenomenon started. The idea of fake news was lib Democrat media going around saying that the only reason people wanted to vote for Trump was because they believed these Russian disinformation articles online, because they were believing fake news. That's how they started fake news, and then Trump, in his Trumpian jujitsu way, flipped them around, flat on their backs and was like, actually, you're fake news. because your propaganda organs, the lib media is a bunch of propaganda organs pretending to be news organizations. But you know who is weighing in now on election interference, which tells you a lot about what we should expect here? Hillary. I'm not really as good at the Hillary voice anymore. It's gotten hard to do it. But here she is telling you all. She's, I just want to say this. Do we think that she's ready to be VP if Biden were to just happen to call upon her? I mean, she could maybe find some time in her schedule. I don't think he will do it. I don't believe it's going to happen. But I think Hillary thinks that it still could. I really do. I think that she is there is a hole in her soul that will only be filled by being president. And she knows now the only way she could ever become president is to be appointed vice president. It would be quite a move. It would certainly shake things up. Could you imagine if Biden? I think the VP pick is, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. I think it's getting all this attention and that people ultimately won't really care all that much. But it certainly could be, if it were Hillary. I know, I want her to come back and be in the mix again just because it's so much fun for me as a commentator. Play clip 21, though. Here she is on election interference.
I hope the press covers the vulnerabilities of our election systems to interference, something that we now know more about than we did right after 2016. I hope that even Republicans will find their patriotism, their conscience, try to force some of the classified information into the public arena so that people have a better idea about what's going on. And of course, the Biden campaign and all of the allies it has have to be as vigorous as possible in refuting and rebutting all of the disinformation and flat out lies that we can expect the Russians to be part of ramping up.
She's still fixated on this. The Democrats are still very deeply rooted in this delusion that Russians are able to control American political discourse on Facebook. I mean, this is sheer madness. This would be like me investing $100 in the stock market and then claiming that I'm making markets happen and I'm shifting the stock price. I'm involved, but it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. It is an unserious position that Russian propaganda on Facebook against the Democrats or against Hillary is shifting the election one way or the other. Unserious. And it's kind of the way that I also think about when people complain about refs in a very close game. There are some who will say, look, if you were good enough to beat the team without having it come down to one call, you would have won, right? I mean, now I'm not saying that excuses election interference, but I'm just saying if it's really that narrow that it's going to be 10 people that read something on Facebook, maybe you shouldn't have been president. Maybe you didn't deserve to win that one. I don't know what to tell you. But Hillary will never, ever give this one up because it's essential. It is essential to the Democrat mythology about why Donald Trump became president in the first place. And then there's just the really deeply stupid stuff that will be said about all of this. And if you're looking for commentary under the guise of news that is shockingly dumb, you can't do a whole lot better than CNN. Well, you'll have news anchors, and Jim Acosta is perhaps the best example of this, but news anchors will come out and say things you say, wow, have you ever read a book from start to finish? I mean, ever. But no, I'm up there and I've got a lot of hairspray and I've got a serious sounding voice and I've got a microphone in my hand and people should listen to me. Sure they should. Jim Acosta. And all these other jokers too. It's amazing. It's amazing that people still believe this stuff. A lot of the dumbest people I know are in the news media. I'm just going to tell you. And I know them. They're morons. But people still say, oh, they turn it on. Oh, they must be smart. They must be smart. One of the reasons I love radio so much is that this is too hard for 90% of the people in journalism to do. Maybe 95%. They just can't. They could never. Carrying a 3-hour show, never mind 5 hours for what I do, carrying a 3-hour show every day, unscripted, without someone feeding everything into your ear, without reading off of a prompter, where it's just you, your thoughts, your knowledge, your presentation, no chance they could ever do it. A lot of people can put on a suit, look pretty, and say, hello, I'm here, and I'm reading off of a prompter. As you can tell, I have no respect at all for CNN. But here's CNN's Jeremy Diamond doing a little bit of analysis on the possibility of Trump giving a speech for the acceptance of the Republican nomination at a place that Jeremy Diamond has some thoughts on the significance of. Play 3.
And Pam, we've reported that President Trump is considering delivering his GOP nomination acceptance speech from the White House. But amid some criticism of that potential venue, the president is now floating another one. This time, he's talking about the hallowed Civil War battlefield in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. But that could be controversial, too, particularly because this is a president who has consistently positioned himself as a defender of Confederate symbols and monuments to Confederate generals. Pam?
Yeah, that's a fair point to make.
Yeah, that's a fair. Oh, yeah, that's a fair. No, it's not, you morons. Do you know what happened at the Battle of Gettysburg? Just somebody, I'm just, anybody want to, unbelievable. This should be like saying, oh, he's commemorating the successful landing on D-Day. Clearly a Nazi sympathizer. No, we won that one. Gettysburg, as you all know, I don't have to get into it, right? I mean, the Union turned back the Confederacy. It was turning the tide of the war. And so if you give a speech at Gettysburg, the hallowed ground of Gettysburg, that's a problem because of your support for the Confederacy? That's a really strange way to celebrate support for the Confederacy. But there's no limit to the stupid at CNN. It doesn't matter because it was anti-Trump. It was, there are questions about this. He likes the Confederacy, and he's a bad guy, and he's a white nationalist. Whatever you have to say, they just say it. Doesn't matter if it's true or not. They have an agenda, my friends. And as long as they stick to that agenda, the libs will always back them up, and they know it. Any day now, there's going to be a Biden VP pick. That's what we're told. Woo! Get excited. A Biden VP pick. Representative Maxine Waters weighed in on this one. Here's what she says. Play 8.
I don't know exactly whom it's going to be. I know whom I would prefer. But I don't think that whom I would prefer has anything to do with who he's going to select. But obviously, as they have gone through all of the women, Black, white, Asian, what have you, it seems to me they have gotten down to possibly just 2, and that is Kamala and that is Susan. And so I believe that it will be one of them. I do have a preference. I'm not going to say who it is at this point, but I think my preference is going to be the one that will be selected.
I got to say, the first time I think in a long time we played a Maxine Waters clip where I don't have any problem with anything that she said, right? I think she's right. I think that Kamala Harris and Susan Rice are the last 2 in the race here. And I think that I've told you on air, I've been making the prediction all along. This is a fun prediction because if I'm wrong, nobody cares. If I'm right, I get to pat myself on the back, which none of you will care about either. Because we have that kind of relationship team where, when I do a victory dance, don't worry. Producer Mark tells me afterwards that my head's getting big and I can't fit through the door. And I know you all are like, come on, Buck. We don't come to you for your predictions anyway. But although my prediction about the pandemic, not that I said it was a pandemic, but that something bad was going to happen that was a little weird. That was a little eerie. I'm just going to say it. But I think it is going to be Kamala Harris for a number of reasons. Other people I know who are very smart and very sound thinkers on issues of politics say that it might be Susan Rice because she was part of the Obama foreign policy team, in many ways the architect of it. Rice and Samantha Power. And Samantha Power was a disaster. So was Susan Rice. Obama's foreign policy was one of the weakest, and there was a lot to criticize for the 8 years of Obama, but his foreign policy was among the weakest, least defensible parts of his presidency. Senator Tom Cotton points out what it would mean to have a Susan Rice as a VP. Play 4.
Brian, Susan Rice was the typhoid Mary of the Obama administration foreign policy. every major debacle in President Obama's tenure, Susan Rice was right in the middle of. Like, look at China. She consistently counseled appeasement towards China. She commanded that our military leaders in the Pacific not raise China's efforts to militarize the South China Sea and create bases out of rocks in the water to extend the range of their planes and their missiles. She was right in the middle of the Iran nuclear deal. She counseled appeasement of Russia going into the 2016 election. And then after the election, she was at the center of spying on the Trump campaign and unmasking American citizens who had been caught up in that dragnet. You know, most nominees face the jury of the American people. Susan Rice would be the first one to potentially face a grand jury as well.
Now, I've got to tell you, in a sense, it would be perfect if Susan Rice teamed up with Biden here as the VP, because they both have incredibly consistent foreign policy records of being wrong all the time and of their ideas leading to disastrous outcomes. So in that way, they're highly compatible. But I do just believe that I think the media want their person, and they loved Kamala Harris. I mean, they love Beto as well, and I miss Beto because he's just such an empty-headed fraud that it was hilarious to get to talk about him. But Kamala is, I think, still going to be the one. And then people start to ask the question, well, what's the point exactly of voting for Biden if you're really going to get Kamala? And we didn't want Kamala when we could have voted for Kamala. So what's really going on here? Democrats will figure that out.